My name is Jessica. I've never spoken these words aloud before. I've alluded and complained, but never confessed. Confession is the right word. To you. There, my story is this. One that I am ashamed of. It began on an ordinary Tuesday in late spring, with the air pleasantly scented with new-cut grass and lilac. The sun slowly stretched long shadows across my living room. I entered from the garden carrying a basket of wilted herbs, believing the light to be golden. How foolish I was, not knowing that this glimmer presaged all to tarnish. My housemate Kyle was home. He's always home. A soft murmur in my existence. 23, full of youthful beauty and vigor. He's studying film or something artistic. He pays his rent on time, he cleans the kitchen, and he respects his space. We peacefully coexist. Until that Tuesday. I had been outside in the garden, battling the rampant rosemary bush. My fingers were tacky with sap, and the fragrance clung to my skin. I was parched for something cold, such as lemonade, so I stepped inside, basket in hand, humming a stuck song in my head. The living room was empty, and the TV was off, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon. Kyle would normally be sprawled on the couch with headphones on, watching a film. It was quiet. Too quiet. So I paused in the hallway to the bedrooms. That was when I heard the sound, gentle but rhythmic. A dull thud with breathy sounds like someone gasping or groaning. I first thought that he was hurt, maybe from a fall or sickness. Concern replaced my usual annoyance at his carelessness as I hurried in the direction of the sound in his bedroom. The door, habitually ajar, was shut. The noise was distinct and inescapable, not thudding, but rhythm. The gasps and groans were not those of agony. My fingers stalled on the doorknob, a tight ball in my stomach. Disarray battled disturbing fascination. Was he ill? No, it sounded nothing like illness. I knocked lightly, hesitantly. Stillness, then muffled rustling that stopped. My heart pounded unevenly. "Kyle?" I said, my tone inappropriately cheerful, given the pain. "All right, in there?" Additional rustling, followed by a voice. His, breathing and slightly higher than usual. "Yeah, just, give me a sec." "All right," I answered, yet I stayed still, the basket of herbs heavy in my hand. Seconds turned into minutes. The oppressive silence was charged with an unnamed feeling. Shame? Awkwardness? No, something darker, stabbing into my awareness. The door creaks open. Kyle stood, red-faced, hair disheveled, and sweat on his brow. He wore unbuttoned jeans and was bare-chested, panting. Behind him, the room was a mess. Clothes strewn across. The floor. Sheets tangled on the bed. A laptop teetering on the nightstand, its screen blinking with something. He quickly minimized it so I couldn't see it. "Hi, Jessica," he said to her, his voice shaking but trying to sound casual. "Just, auditioning for a role?" He tried to fake a weak smile. My gaze, against my will, scanned into the room. For that instant, I saw it. Twisted arms, white flesh against black, a glimpse of long hair. Then it disappeared as Kyle turned, covering what I had seen. The air in the hall became dense, suffocating. I held my breath. "Right," I breathed. My face burned with embarrassment. Not for him, but for myself, for having intruded on something so personal. I backed away, clutching the herb basket. "Sorry," I mumbled, hurrying to the kitchen, the image of tangled limbs branded in my mind. The golden light was harsh and judgmental. The rosemary in my basket appeared prickly and accusatory. I upset the basket on the counter, herbs spilling out in a fragrant mess, echoing the mayhem of my Tuesday afternoon. My heart was racing, not from fear, but at the unnamed, unsettling heat that ran through my chest. It was Kyle with someone visiting. The image and sounds reran in my mind, clear and persisting, with the sensation of leaving me with the impression that something had silently but irreparably shifted in our quiet home. Things had altered, and I wasn't sure I wanted them to revert. The cold, sour lemonade was refreshing, but didn't succeed in breaking the heat in my cheeks. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the acrid green mess of scattered herbs, trying to focus on anything other than Kyle and him. Who was he, anyway? I saw enough to recognize that it wasn't an accidental encounter. There was intimacy in the sounds and secrecy in his bedroom. That was the strangest part of it, wasn't it? The secrecy. Under the same roof, in the same house. But there is a secret world down the hallway. I reran the scene in my head repeatedly, noticing details that I had not even observed. Kyle's open fly, his red face, and damp hair. The pale skin contrasts. With darker... was that a tattoo? A dark, swirling form on his arm shifted in my recollection. It's ridiculous how incomplete images can expand into detailed, intrusive fantasies. I should let it go, I told myself. It's Kyle's life and his business. I'd learned something intimate and was ashamed. That should have been the end of it. Back to normal cohabitation. But normal was impossible now. The house, once a sanctuary, was now electric. Every creak of ice floorboards and rustle of leaves outside was amplified, carrying an ominous meaning. Later that evening, he came out for dinner. We usually ate in silence, but tonight, the air was electric with unspoken tension. He wore a loose t-shirt and jeans, but still looked different. Was he flushed? Or was I imagining things? He avoided my eyes, behaving awkwardly in a manner not common to his usual confidence. "Hello?" he muttered, going to the fridge. He got out orange juice, poured a glass, and gulped it down without looking at me. "Hi," I said, my tone a little too bright. I was heating pasta and pesto, but the smell of garlic and basil was overpowering tonight. "Is everything okay?" Smooth, Jessica. Very smooth. Like you hadn't just caught him having sex. He gulped his juice. "Yeah, okay. Just tired. Long day." "Right," I said, stepping back from the stove and stirring the pasta hard. "You said you were exercising?" I was shocked that I was even asking this, pushing when I should just leave it alone. He changed position, holding the glass of juice. "Yeah, exercise and lines. Had to learn a lot for the audition." His gaze met mine for a moment before shifting. "Away? An audition?" I asked, feigning interest. "For what?" "Student film. Just a student film. Nothing big." He flicked his hand dismissively, but his cheeks darkened further up his neck. I drained the spaghetti, mixed in the pesto, and served it in 2 bowls. I placed one before him and kept the other for myself. The pasta descended, thicker, broken only by clinking forks. The plain pasta was textureless. I pushed it around my plate, my hunger lost. He ate with feigned relish, chewing fast and swallowing without savoring. He emptied his bowl quickly, sighing in relief more than contentment. "Thanks," he said, his eyes meeting mine with an unfathomable glance. "That was... good." "Fine," I muttered, my gaze on my bowl. The silent tension squeezed the air out of the space around us. I wished to insist on an explanation and shatter his politeness of denial, but the words would not come. Shame and reserve kept me silent. He rose abruptly to his feet. "Hitting the books," he said, scraping his chair noisily. "Big day tomorrow." "Okay," I whispered. He turned and walked, vanishing down the hall in the direction of his room, leaving me alone with the scent of pesto and unspoken words. I sat for hours, staring at the scattered herbs, congealed noodles, and the stifling silence. The ordinary. Tuesday had shattered, and what remained was tension, curiosity, and the sensation of something forbidden brewing in the background. I knew, bone-chillingly certain, that this was only the start of something far more complex than I could even imagine. The next few days passed in a haze of heightened awareness and carefully constructed normalcy. We moved around each other like cautious strangers, polite smiles and minimal conversation our only currency. The tension in the house was palpable, a low hum beneath the surface of everyday life. I found myself listening for him constantly, attuned to the sounds of his movements, the opening and closing of his door, the murmur of his voice on phone calls I pretended not to overhear. Sleep became a battlefield. My mind, usually quiet and easily lulled, was now a restless landscape of fragmented images and unspoken questions. I'd drift off, only to be jolted awake by the memory of that glimpse into his room, the sounds, the flushed skin, the tattoo. The tattoo kept haunting me. A dark swirl, like smoke or ink spreading in water. I knew it was ridiculous, fixating on such a trivial detail, but it felt symbolic somehow, a marker of the hidden, the unknown, the forbidden. During the day, I tried to distract myself. Longer hours in the garden, weeding and pruning with a frantic energy. Endless lists of chores, cleaning and organizing every corner of the house, trying to impose order on the growing chaos within me. I even started going for runs in the park, pushing myself until my lungs burned and my legs ached, hoping to exhaust myself into a state of numb oblivion. But nothing worked. The image of Kyle, the unspoken tension, the insistent hum of something, it followed me everywhere. One afternoon I was in the living room, ostensibly reading a book, but really just staring blankly at the pages. Kyle came in, heading for the bookshelf. He paused when he saw me, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Hey," I replied, marking my place in the book with a sigh and putting it down. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable, charged. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I was starting to recognize. "Listen," he began, still not meeting my eyes. "About the other day." My heart leapt, a sudden jolt of adrenaline. This was it. The confrontation, the explanation, the awkward attempt at clearing the air. I braced myself, my palms suddenly clammy. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He shifted his weight, still fiddling with his hair. I wanted to apologize. For the mess. And for, being loud. He finally glanced up at me, his eyes pleading, vulnerable. Mess? Loud? Was that really what he thought was bothering me? Or was it just easier to pretend that was all it was? A convenient deflection, avoiding the real issue, the elephant in the hallway. "It's fine," I said, my voice sounding flat, emotionless. "Don't worry about it." But he did worry. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he wouldn't quite meet my gaze, in the subtle shift in his posture, a kind of guardedness that hadn't been there before. He was walking on eggshells around me, and I was doing the same around him, and the house was becoming a minefield of unspoken anxieties. He finally found the book he was looking for, a heavy tome on film theory, and turned to leave. As he passed, his arm brushed against mine, a fleeting, accidental contact, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. A strange, unexpected warmth bloomed in my chest, quickly followed by a wave of shame and confusion. It was just a brush of skin, a completely insignificant moment, and yet it felt significant, charged, forbidden. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he gave no sign. He just mumbled another "see ya" and retreated back to his room, leaving me sitting there, my skin tingling, my heart pounding, the air around me thick with unspoken desires and dangerous possibilities. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that just ignoring it, pretending it hadn't happened, wasn't going to work. The seed had been planted, the curiosity ignited, and something within me, something I hadn't acknowledged, hadn't even been aware of until that Tuesday afternoon, was starting to stir, to awaken. And the direction it was stirring in, that was the terrifying, thrilling, utterly wrong part of it all. The part that I was slowly, inexorably being drawn towards. It happened on a Friday night. Friday nights were usually my sanctuary. A glass of wine, a good movie, a quiet escape from the week. That Friday, though, the sanctuary felt more like a cage. The silence was oppressive, the movie unengaging, the wine doing little to soothe the restless energy thrumming beneath my skin. Kyle was home, I knew. His door was closed, but I could hear the faint murmur of music seeping from beneath the crack. He was always listening to music, a soundtrack to his youthful existence that seemed to underscore my growing sense of aging, of fading relevance. Ridiculous, I know. 47 isn't old. But lately, in the charged atmosphere of the house, I felt every year, every perceived imperfection, magnified, exposed. I got up from the sofa, restless, pacing the living room like a caged animal. The movie flickered on the screen, unheard, unseen. The wine in my glass swirled, untouched. I felt trapped. Trapped in the silence, trapped in the unspoken tension, trapped in my own body with its unfamiliar longings and unsettling desires. On impulse, I walked down the hallway towards his room. My heart started to pound again, a heavy, uneven rhythm. What was I doing? I didn't know. Just drawn, pulled by an invisible force, a magnetic pull towards the forbidden, the unknown. I stopped outside his door, listening. The music was louder, now a pulsing rhythmic beat. I could hear his voice too, humming along, slightly off-key, but infused with a youthful energy that both fascinated and irritated me. Irritated because it highlighted my own perceived lack of energy, my own fading vibrancy. Without thinking, without planning, I knocked. 3 soft, hesitant taps. The music stopped abruptly. Silence. Then, his voice, closer this time, slightly muffled by the door. "Yeah? Who is it?" It's Jessica," I said, my voice barely audible above the pounding of my own heart. More silence. Then, the sound of footsteps approached the door. The doorknob turned, and the door opened, slowly, cautiously. He stood there, framed. In the doorway, his eyes wide, questioning. He was wearing just a t-shirt, loose and slightly too big for him, and sweatpants hanging low on his hips. His hair was slightly damp, and he smelled faintly of something musky, slightly sweet. The same scent I'd caught a whiff of in the hallway the other day. "Jessica," he said, his voice still hesitant, laced with surprise. "Everything? Okay. I stammered, the words catching in my throat. I didn't know what to say. What was I doing here? I wanted to ask about the music. Lame. Pathetic. Utterly unconvincing." He frowned slightly, his eyes narrowing, searching my face. "The music?" he repeated, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile, a weak, shaky attempt at normalcy. I liked it." "What is it?" He hesitated for another moment, then seemed to relax slightly, the suspicion in his eyes fading, replaced by a flicker of something else. Curiosity? Intrigue? "Oh," he said, stepping back and opening the door wider. It's a band called Crimson Tide. You probably haven't heard of them. They're pretty underground." "Crimson Tide," I repeated, stepping closer, drawn into the room by an invisible force. "No, I don't think I have. Can I hear it?" My voice sounded breathy, unnatural, even to my ears. He hesitated again, then shrugged, a careless, youthful gesture. "Sure," he said, stepping aside completely, gesturing for me to enter. "Come in." And I did. I stepped across the threshold, into his room, into his space, into the forbidden territory of his private world. The air inside was warmer, thicker, scented with that same musky sweetness, now intensified, almost intoxicating. The music started up again, pulsing, rhythmic, filling the room with its insistent beat. And as I stood there, just inside the doorway, looking at him, really looking at him, for the first time since that Tuesday afternoon, I knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that there was no turning back. The line had been crossed. The unspoken had been spoken, in a language of glances and hesitant words, and we were both standing on the precipice of something dangerous, something irreversible. Strangely, terrifyingly, I didn't want to step away. I wanted to jump. His room was him, disordered, energetic, and filled with the chaotic energy of youth. Clothes were scattered on the floor, books and papers piled on the desk, film posters plastered on the walls. A half-empty glass of something that smelled vaguely of citrus sat on the nightstand next to his bed. It was a mess, but it was his mess, and at that moment, it felt intimate, revealing, like stepping inside his mind, his inner world. He gestured towards the bed, a double bed, rumpled and inviting. "Want to sit down?" he offered, his voice still a little hesitant, but with a new undercurrent of something else. Anticipation, nervous excitement. I nodded, my legs feeling strangely weak, and moved towards the bed, sinking onto the edge of the mattress. He sat down beside me, a careful distance between us, but the air crackled with unspoken awareness, the space charged with an almost unbearable tension. The music pulsed around us, the crimson tide's insistent beat filling the silence between words. I looked at him, really looked at him, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the bedside lamp, his eyes dark and deep, pools of unreadable emotion. He was so young, so vital, and in that moment, I felt a pang of something akin to envy. Envy of his youth, his energy, his effortless physicality. And something else, something darker, something that stirred in the pit of my stomach, a primal, undeniable attraction. He met my gaze, his eyes searching mine, questioning, probing. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of the music. And then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out, his hand hovering in the air between us, a silent question hanging in the balance. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. My hand trembled, reaching out, drawn to his like metal to a magnet. Our fingers brushed, then intertwined, a hesitant, tentative connection that sent a jolt of electricity through me, igniting a fire that had been simmering beneath the surface for days, weeks, maybe even longer. His hand was warm, slightly damp, his grip surprisingly firm. He turned his palm upwards, threading his fingers through mine. And then, slowly, gently, he pulled me closer. My body moved as if on autopilot, drawn towards him by an irresistible force. The careful distance between us dissolved, the polite facade crumbling, and we were suddenly closer. Too close, our bodies almost touching, the heat radiating from him palpable, intoxicating. His gaze dropped to my lips, lingering there for a long, breathless moment. Then, he leaned in, slowly, deliberately, bridging the remaining space between us. His breath ghosted across my face, warm and sweet, carrying that same musky scent that had been haunting me for days. And then, his lips were on mine. The kiss was tentative at first, soft, exploratory. But then, as if a dam had broken, it deepened, becoming more insistent, more demanding, fueled by weeks of unspoken tension, of suppressed desires, of forbidden longings finally unleashed. His arms went around me, pulling me closer still, molding, my body against his. My arms rose, almost involuntarily, wrapping around his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair. The world outside the room dissolved, the music fading into a background hum, the house disappearing around us. There was only us, at that moment, in that room, lost in the intoxicating heat of forbidden desire. His kiss was urgent, demanding, exploring every curve and contour of my lips, igniting a fire that spread quickly through my veins, melting away. Every inhibition, every doubt, every shred of resistance. And in that moment, as I kissed him back with a fervor that surprised even myself, I knew that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And that terrified me, but also, impossibly, thrillingly, set my soul alight. The ordinary Tuesday indeed was long, long gone. This is the point, isn't it? The moment everything truly changed. And honestly, telling you this, confessing all of this is hard. But if you're listening, really listening, and you want to hear the rest of my confession, to understand how this mistake completely upended my life, then please hit that subscribe button. Because the story, the real messy truth of it all, it's only just beginning. Thank you for listening. Did you like these infidelity stories? Drop a comment below if you want part 2. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more cheating wife stories.